Hey peeps, welcome back to my channel and the next episode of UITableView, the ultimate tutorial. In this episode, we're going to implement our own UITableViewCell, meaning you will learn how to actually design your cell in the way whatever you want to. And of course, in this one, we will learn how to add an image view, how to add an own label and a description label, for example. But you can really, after you've learned that, basically add whatever you want to that view. We left off last time with just a list of the amiibo names, right? So the first thing we are going to do here is create a new Command N Swift file, calling it amiibo cell, because we are going to not only import UIKit, but also inherit from UITableViewCell. So that basically means our amiibo cell is now having everything a UITableViewCell has, which are some basic properties we are already using, like for example the I think it's called text label, right? So if we go back to our amiibo list view controller, we can see down here that we are using the cells property text label. So basically that DQ reusable cell returns a table view cell, and a table view cell has some default properties, like for example text label, as well an image view, as well a detail text label. But and we are pretty much doing what it's already providing, but we're doing it in our own way and styled our own way. And the way we're doing it is the same way you would do it if you want to add even more subviews, even more labels, even more images whatsoever. Okay, that's why we're going that way and not using the default properties. However, why I'm going into the view controller right here, right now, is because we have registered to our table view the cell it should use when it cannot find a reusable cell and should create a new cell instance. And we want that it will create not a UITableViewCell, but an amiibo cell. So that's why we should register that instead, which is a UITableViewCell. But what am I doing here? God damn it. Which is a UITableViewCell, but as well a amiibo cell with own custom properties that we have defined in it. Not yet, but in a second. So down here, when it will dequeue a reusable cell, like I have explained it in the first episode, on the first creation of the table view and all its cell, it will not find a reusable cell because there is no existent, and it will create new instances of a UITableViewCell based on the class that is registered to it, which is in this case amiibo cell, and it will return that. So that is what's happening here right now. If we run that, it will still run properly because as I said, our amiibo cell is still having the default properties of UITableViewCell. That's why we can still access the labels and assign to it values, and we can still see everything like we do right now. So back in our amiibo cell, we will define our first subview. Let's define our image view, and we'll do that by just calling it image view, image view, and initiating a new image view up here. I'm calling it image view IV because there is a property called image, and Xcode will complain if you are using the same name. We will also need two initializers, one to override this one and just pass up what we get passed into here, which is one is style and the other is reuse identifier. That's basically it. And then there's Command Enter to let Xcode add the other required initializer, which we don't care about. I think it's the initializer that would have been used if we would use the zip or nip file, which is basically the interface builder way of designing your UITableViewCell. But we're doing it programmatically, so that's why we're going with, we're not caring about that. All right, so let's create a function that says setup view, and let's call that function in the init setup view. And let's create another function that actually setups our image view. So setup image view, and let's call it in setup view. And let's also mark that properly as setup. And here we go. The first thing we are going to do, as always, is of course adding our image view, because we are now about to constrain it. We are adding it to our UITableViewCell as a subview, and now we're constraining it, positioning it. So in order to do that, we have to disable translate auto resizing mask into constraints, and then we are going, where do we want to position it? Basically, we want to position it on the left, I would say, from the cell, with the consideration of the margins, because there is a line not starting from the left side screen, but from a certain margin. And so we cannot use the view. If I select something, it will gray out the whole UITableViewCell, meaning that the view starts on the left of the screen, but the line starts with a consideration of a certain margin, and we want that consideration as well if we are aligning our image view. So you have learned also in the first episode how to get the safe area, basically the area that is also having the margins. So I call it safe area, and that's a UI not IO. UI layout guide, and in setup view we are assigning to our safe area the layout margins guide, and then we can use that for the leading anchor that we will constrain equal to the safe area's leading anchor, right? So leading anchor is the left side anchor, and it's that one that starts with the line as well. Otherwise it would have been the very left side of the screen. Okay, so and one more constraint, that is the center y-axis. So we have our image constraint in the middle of the vertical axis, and we will constrain that equal to the center y-axis. We can just access the center y-axis, which basically means from self, because UITableView itself is a view, and then we are accessing that's its view center y-axis to constrain it to our image view. Is active equals true. And last but not least, basically the size of our image view. We won't see anything if we're not giving a size, for example, a width equal to constant right here. Let's give it a 40. Is active equals true. Copy paste, same thing with the height anchor. Now, if we run that, we should see an image view being red, not being red because we haven't added a background color. That's why we won't see an image view, although it's there. It's transparent. Believe me, just believe me, it's true. Background color equals red, so we can actually see it. And it will overlap the text label, because the text label is just constrained having its default constraints. We haven't changed that, and we have added a subview and constrained it, and it's somewhat, it's overlapping other views. We are not using the text label view. We can just actually define our own label. Let's call it name label. It's in UI label, and let's set up that label as well. Set up name label. That's the way we want it to go. And also call it up here. And then the same game as before. We are adding that view as a first action. And then we are constraining it. And where do we want to constrain it? Basically, I want that its leading anchor is basically the trailing anchor of the image, maybe even with a little bit of a margin, like a constant. So let's do that. Leading anchor is constrained equal to, and not equal to only, but equal to with a constant. So that's basically the margin. And we will take the image view's trailing anchor. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Trailing anchor. And then a constant of, let's say 5. And I've forgotten the translate magic. translate false. All right, so we are aligning our name label to the image view, and now we want to align it as well on the top of the view with a little bit of a margin as well. So false is missing an S. So name label top anchor should be constrained equal to, with a constant, oh, we have it up here already, to, let's say, top anchor, and then a constant of 5 as well is active equals true. If we run that, that will not show our label at all, and it will show the default text label still where it is constrained to, because we haven't used our name label here. How do we change that? Now, back in the view controller, we have registered that cell, and it still has a text label property. It also has a name label property, right? But we are not using it here, obviously. We can, and we can't access it just here. As you can see, there is no auto-completion. How comes? Well, it's very simple, because the cell we are trying to access is, if we look at this function, what it returns is a UITableViewCell. And does a UITableViewCell include a property called nameLabel? I don't think so. It's having some other properties, but we know that it will be, I mean, it is an Amiibo cell and it is a UITableViewCell, but all our code knows by now is that it's a UITableViewCell. We have to cast it to the cell we want it to be, because we know it will work out and we will be able to use it. So let's do that. We will use a guard let statement and say Amiibo cell is equal cell as Amiibo cell else return just that cell. If it won't work out, the casting, which it will, because we have registered the Amiibo cell, and that DQ reusable cell will create new instances based on that class that should conform to a UITableViewCell, so it can return that UITableViewCell type. But all it knows at this point, it is a UITableViewCell type, and we can from there on cast it to our Amiibo cell. And then by casting it, our code will also know, okay, now I also know about the name properties and image view properties. And so I'm just going the safe way here to like return the cell, because there has to be a UITableViewCell returned. But basically it should never reach that code here. We just don't have an optional anymore and can access Amiibo cell dot and all our properties aside from the default UITableView properties, which are name label, for example. And name label dot text can be exchanged with that one. And if we now hit Command R, we should see our image view and a name label properly constrained to it, because it's the other one, right? We could also, like, at the same time, let's just, to have it more visually displayed, also use the text label, the default one, right? And call it old, Command R. So you can see, yeah, that's optional. So you can see that there are two labels existing in that view. We're just using the other one now, right? And not the first one, the default one. So you can see the old is still there, but yeah, not needed. Thanks. All right. Next, we want to actually give another label, our UITableView, to describe the game series. Let's do that. So back in our Amiibo cell, we will just describe a new, let game series be a new UI label. Do that. Have it as a function, let's call it setup game series label. And let's call it up here. Sometimes I would forget to call my setup functions in the setup view, and then I would wonder, why is it not appearing? Did I do anything wrong? My code compiles, nothing complains. I just forgot to call the function. God damn it. Sometimes it happens. So if it happens to you, here's a call. to like check that. All right, add subview game series. Oh, I didn't call it game series label, right? I like to call the properties or have a suffix. Is it a suffix of the type they are actually representing? So label. So I know it's a label. You get it. It's just preference. Anyway, back to the tutorial. So translates. That's so repetitive, but it has to be done. So game series, where do we want to constrain it to? I would like to, first of all, I would like to constrain it right underneath the name label, and also the leading anchor to be aligned with the leading anchor of the name label. So let's do that. So leading anchor of our game series label should be constrained to the name label's leading anchor. So why aren't we doing the same leading anchor constraint than the name label, which means to the image view's trailing anchor? Basically because I want to set the relation from the game series label to the name label. So whenever I'm moving the name label to the left, to the right, so basically I'm changing the leading anchor of the name label, the game series label will always follow, because it will always be related to the leading anchor of the name label and not stay at the place when I change the name label because it's constrained to the image view, right? And I like that relation much better because that's the real relation here in the context. So active is true, and then also we have the top anchor of it being the bottom anchor of name label, and basically no constant is active equals true. All right, so far so good. Let's go back into our Amiibo view controller, Amiibo list view controller, and also give our AmiiboCell.GameSeries label text a actual text. So Amiibo.GameSeries, I guess that is the right one. If we command R, run our app, we see our name, we see our game series, and we see an image view. 8-bit Link, The Legend of Zelda, my beloved game. Okay, last step, last but not least, let's give it a little bit of a bold appearance for the name and a smaller text for the game series. So that's very easily achieved. So name label should be a little bit more bold. So we can give the font property of name label a new instance of UI font and use the name size initializer and call or give it Verdana bold. Verdana is a font family I actually like, and give it a size of 16. If we command R, you will see it is already bold, and I think, is it even larger than before? I think 16 is default, maybe? Might be default, so might not be necessary. So game series font should then be a UI font, and we want Verdana, but not the bold one, and maybe a smaller size of 14. And now we have our UI table view populated with our custom UI table view cell with an image view, with a name label, and with a game series label. And that's the episode, peeps. Thanks so much for watching. In the next episode, we will cover how to load asynchronously the image and populate our image view with it. Feel free to leave any comments of any kind. Any constructive feedback is very welcome. Negative and positive things that you have noticed about my teaching style or my videos, as well as leave a comment about the topic you want me to cover next and in detail. In the description box, you will find a lot of links about my social media. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm very accessible. And also a link to Patreon. If you want to download every source code of every video, you are able to support me to do that multiple times a week and not only once, which is right now the schedule. And download it from there. Just check it out. Other than that, I hope you liked it, and see you next time. Bye.